hints at a storm brewing. Rachel Turner pulls into the gas station, the engine of her old Honda sputtering like it might give out any moment. She cuts the ignition, but the car sits there for a few seconds, its rattling quieting down as she takes a deep breath. The day had been long. It always was. She'd woken up at 4 a.m., barely enough time to grab a bite before heading out to her first rideshare pickup, working 3 different jobs just to keep the bills paid and her daughter, Emma, in school. The day feels like it's trying to wear her down, the miles accumulating on her car and in her bones. But Rachel's been doing this for years. She's learned to expect the endless underestimation, the quick judgments people make the second they see her. They see her worn-out jeans, her tired eyes, and her aging car, and they assume she's nothing. But that doesn't matter. She's used to it. Just as she's about to swipe on the Uber app to check her next ride, the ping comes in. She swipes, and the address pops up. A mansion on the outskirts of town. Her stomach drops for a split second. She's not unfamiliar with driving to the wealthier areas. It's always been part of the job. But when she arrives at these places, the looks she gets from the people, those with the luxury cars and the perfect lives, always sting. It's a reminder of just how out of place she is. She pulls out of the gas station and follows the GPS, the deep thrum of the engine matching the quickened pulse in her neck. As she drives, her mind wanders, thinking about how much longer she can keep doing this. How much longer she can keep pretending that the dream of something better isn't slipping through her fingers like sand. When she pulls up to the front of the mansion, the grand pillars and neatly manicured lawn send a shiver through her. She parks, takes a quick breath, and heads toward the front door. It opens before she can ring the bell. A man, probably in his mid-30s, with sharp features and an expensive suit, stands in the doorway. "Rachel?" he asks, the tone in his voice giving off a sense of detachment, as though he's done this a million times. She nods and offers him a smile, trying to keep things professional. "Yes, I'm Rachel. I'll be your driver today." He raises an eyebrow as his gaze sweeps over her car. His eyes flicker for a moment before he steps out, closing the door behind him without so much as a glance back. It's the same every time. His expression says it all. She's just the help. The man slides into the passenger seat, checking his phone without a word. Rachel glances over at him, his perfectly pressed shirt and glossy shoes contrasting sharply with her faded jeans and work-worn sneakers. She doesn't mind it. She's been here before, doing this job for the last 4 years, every day, never quite fitting into the world she's driving through. "Where to?" she asks, trying to sound upbeat, though the tension in the air makes it hard. He glances up at her, his lips curling slightly. "Just drive. You know the way," he says, almost condescending, like he expects her to know exactly where he needs to go without asking. Rachel doesn't flinch. She's learned to brush off the disrespect. But as she pulls away from the driveway and turns onto the main road, she can't ignore the weight of his presence. His air of superiority hangs in the car, thickening the space between them. He speaks again, almost to himself. "You know, this job's probably beneath you." He glances at her. "I mean, it's gotta be tough driving around people like me in a car like this, right?" Rachel's hands tighten on the steering wheel. She's heard it before, too many times. The quiet mockery, the judgment in his voice, as if she doesn't belong in the world she's in. The irony doesn't escape her, but she doesn't bite. Not today. Not anymore. Instead, she takes a deep breath and keeps her eyes on the road. "It pays the bills," she says quietly, focusing on the road ahead. There's a long silence as the car hums along the road. The cityscape starts to shift into something different. The wealthier side of town, the place where people have everything she's worked for but never had. As she approaches the neighborhood, she knows the look on his face is coming. It's always the same when she pulls up to these places. "Must be nice," he mutters, eyeing the big houses through the window. "Too bad it's a job for people like you." Rachel doesn't answer right away, her chest tightening at his words. But as the car moves past another house, she feels her thoughts start to shift. She remembers Emma, her daughter, and the promise she made to herself years ago, that she'd give her everything. She'd work her fingers to the bone if that's what it took. It's always been about Emma, her kid, the only thing that keeps her going. She finally speaks, her voice steady. People like me can do anything if they try. The words hang in the air for a moment. It's not a response he's expecting, but it's the truth. The kind of truth that burns quietly beneath the surface. She keeps her eyes on the road ahead as she drives past one luxurious home after another. The man shifts in his seat, clearly annoyed by her calm, but Rachel doesn't back down. The streets get quieter as they move further into the upscale neighborhood, but the tension doesn't let up. The man watches her from the corner of his eye, his disdain growing. "I just don't get it," he mutters under his breath. "You could be doing something better. Something where you don't have to dress like that and drive around in a beat-up car." Rachel's jaw tightens. He doesn't know a thing about her, about the sacrifices she's made, about what she's worked for. But he's already made up his mind. People like her don't belong here. They don't belong in spaces where success is defined by shiny cars and shiny suits. But she's okay with that. She's been living in the shadows of others' judgments for too long. The man continues, oblivious to the effect his words have on her. "It's just funny to me," he says. "You're just a driver. Nothing more." Rachel doesn't respond. She simply focuses on the road, her heart beating steadily beneath her ribs. The moment will pass. It always does. But something inside her stirs. She's done with this. She's done with being looked down upon. She's done with carrying the weight of other people's opinions. For the first time in a long time, a quiet fire begins to burn. He doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know what she's capable of. And soon he will. The car pulls up to his destination, a high-rise office building, sleek and imposing. The man gets out without a thank you or even a second glance. As he walks away, Rachel watches him, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the stillness. But she's already thinking about what comes next. She's already planning her next move. If he knew what she was really driving, he wouldn't have said what he did. If he knew what she had built, without anyone's help, without anyone's permission, he wouldn't have dared. But that's the thing about people like him. They never see you coming. And when they do, it's too late. As she drives away, she can't help but smile, the weight of the world lifting off her shoulders. The sky has darkened further now, a heavy twilight settling over the streets. The headlights of Rachel's car flicker across the slick pavement, casting shadows that stretch long into the night. She doesn't usually work this late. Too many people out, too many distractions. But tonight she's keeping busy. Tonight, she's driven by something that's more than just exhaustion. It's the sting of his words still echoing in her head. "You're just a driver." She glances at the rearview mirror, but all she sees is the dim glow of her tired reflection. Her lips press into a thin line, the familiar heat of frustration rising within her. How many times has she been told that? Just a driver. As if her job, her life, doesn't amount to anything. She's heard it from others before, some not even bothering to disguise the pity in their voices. Others, like the man from earlier, outright mocked her for doing something they thought was beneath them. She turns the corner, heading for her next pickup. This time it's a bar on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where well-dressed people laugh too loudly, and the clink of glasses fills the air. She parks on the street, the rumble of her car's engine dying down as she waits. Rachel has spent so much of her life waiting. Waiting for things to change, waiting for her moment to rise, waiting for someone, anyone, to see her potential. But no one has, not yet. Her phone pings. It's another request. She picks it up to confirm, only to see that it's the same address, the bar. A different passenger, probably someone with no idea that she's the driver they requested. She checks her watch. It's late, and she's already feeling the weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders. But the moment she agrees to take the ride, she pushes the thoughts away. Just drive. The bar is crowded as she walks in, the music too loud, the chatter too thick, and the smoke in the air thick enough to make her cough. She spots the man immediately. A group of men, laughing, dressed in suits that cost more than she's made in the past month. The irony is thick in the air, making her choke. The man she's here for is already standing by the door, his hand on the edge of his jacket as if trying to keep something from slipping away. "Hey, you Rachel?" he asks, his words slurring slightly. He's younger than she expected, maybe in his late 20s. The arrogance, however, is not lost on him. "That's me," Rachel replies, offering a polite smile, though it doesn't reach her eyes. She's already bracing herself for the familiar judgment. He eyes her up and down. It's not the first time she's been looked over, but somehow it's always a little different. This time she can feel it. He's thinking she's a driver, sure, but she's just that. Nothing more. "Nice car," he says, though the words are hardly a compliment. The way he says it, it's more like a question. "Is it really yours?" Rachel doesn't answer right away. Instead, she lets the awkward silence hang in the air. She's had enough of explaining herself to people who will never get it. Why should she have to prove anything to them? She gestures to the back seat. "We should get going." The man hesitates for a moment before staggering toward the car. He slouches into the back seat, letting the door slam behind him. Rachel gets in, shifting the car into drive, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. The drive feels longer than it should. The man stares at his phone, his fingers tapping the screen aggressively, as if trying to prove something. Maybe he's pretending that he doesn't notice her. Or maybe, just maybe, he's too caught up in his own little world to see what's in front of him. As they make their way through the streets, Rachel can feel the tension start to build. She doesn't want to be here, doesn't want to be invisible anymore. But she knows the drill. She's learned to let the slights slide, to ignore the looks, the whispers. It's the only way to keep her sanity, to survive. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. "Man," the guy says, breaking the silence, "I don't know how you do it. Like, this is just such a dead-end job. Don't you want more? I mean, come on. You could do so much better, right?" Rachel's fingers tighten around the wheel. The words aren't new, but they sting nonetheless. She's been told she could do better before. She's heard it from her mom, from her friends, from old teachers who said she could be anything. Yet here she is, still stuck in a car, still playing by the rules, still ignored by the world outside. "I do what I need to do," Rachel replies flatly, trying to keep the conversation neutral. She keeps her eyes ahead, the streets blurring past her as she focuses on the task at hand. "Just drive." The man laughs, a sharp, cynical sound. "Yeah, I guess. But you're just, what, a driver?" Rachel's chest tightens. He said it again. The way he drags the word out like it's an insult makes her want to slam on the brakes, just so he can feel something, anything. But she doesn't. She's learned to let the insults slide. But that doesn't mean she has to forget them. She doesn't have to like them either. "I don't see what's wrong with being a driver," Rachel says, her voice steady, though there's a little more edge to it than before. "Driving's a good job. People need to get places." The man scoffs, shaking his head. "Sure, whatever you say, lady, but it's not gonna get you anywhere. This is a dead end. You'll always be stuck in the same spot." His words hang in the air, heavy and bitter. The man is drunk, but there's a cruelty to the way he speaks. Maybe he doesn't realize how much it cuts. Or maybe he does and he just doesn't care. But Rachel, she's heard it all before. And for a split second, it hits her, the weight of his words, the weight of what he's saying. "I'm nothing more than a driver." She turns the corner, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. The car hums beneath her, but her mind races. She could tell him the truth. Tell him that she's not just a driver, that she's not stuck in some dead-end job because she wants to be, but instead she just drives. The world has a funny way of seeing people like Rachel, people who don't fit into the mold of success that others expect. And it's funny how the people who have everything always think they know what's best for those who don't. They judge from their ivory towers without ever understanding the climb it took to get there. She parks at his destination, the bar's neon lights flickering in the distance. The man stumbles out of the car, grumbling something under his breath about low-class drivers. Rachel watches him go, his back disappearing into the crowd. Her fingers linger on the steering wheel, but she doesn't move. She lets the silence wash over her for a moment, letting the weight of the day settle in her chest. She feels it all, his mockery, his arrogance, the sting of being overlooked. But this time, it's different. This time, she knows something he doesn't. This time, the joke's on him. She drives off, her car's engine purring. The quiet hum of the wheels beneath her a reminder that she's still moving, still going, still here. And one day, when he least expects it, she'll show him exactly what she's made of. Rachel wakes to the quiet hum of her alarm clock at 4 a.m., the hour that's become so familiar it feels like second nature now. She rolls out of bed, careful not to wake Emma, her teenage daughter, who sleeps soundly in the next room. The house is still, too early for the world to be awake, too early for anyone to notice the things she's doing that no one sees. She moves through the house in a slow, practiced rhythm. First, the coffee machine. Then, the quick glance out the kitchen window to check the weather. Cloudy, as usual. A glance at the calendar on the fridge shows a list of things to do for the day: grocery shopping, cleaning the house, picking up an order for a new client. Life is full of these small tasks, the ones that, in the eyes of the world, define her. A rideshare driver, a single mother, a woman who spends her days being overlooked. But Rachel knows the truth. The world may see her as nothing more than a cog in a machine, another working-class woman doing her part, doing what she has to. They don't see the quiet things she's doing, the things that no one would ever think to look for, the investments. Rachel takes her coffee with her as she sits at the small kitchen table, pulling out a notebook from the drawer and flipping it open to a list of properties. She doesn't talk about it. She doesn't even tell Emma. Not yet. But Rachel's been investing in real estate for the last few years, quietly buying properties here and there. Small houses, mostly. Cheap properties that needed work that no one else wanted to bother with. Her income from ride-sharing is a small part of the equation, but it's not her only source of income. She's been saving every penny she can, diverting the little she can from groceries, from the bills, from the things she'd otherwise put into the family fund. She buys low, renovates, and either rents them out or sells them off for a profit. It's not glamorous. It's not fast, but it's steady. And she's been doing it quietly, without drawing attention to herself. She doesn't need anyone to know what she's building. Not yet. Her phone buzzes on the table, and she looks down to see another ping from the rideshare app. A new customer, picking up in a part of town she's familiar with but doesn't visit much. It's a well-to-do neighborhood, a part of town where people who don't understand the struggle live. They don't understand what it takes to make something of yourself when the odds are stacked against you. They don't understand what it takes to be counted out, only to rise again. She grabs her keys, takes a quick glance at Emma, who's still sound asleep, and heads out the door. The ride to the customer's house is a quiet one, the hum of the engine filling the space between Rachel and the world outside. The city is still waking up, the first signs of light starting to creep over the horizon. She pulls into the driveway of the house, a sleek, modern design with large windows and a manicured lawn. The customer, a man in a dark suit, steps out from the front door. He looks at her car, then at her, his eyes narrowing for just a second before he opens the door to get in. It's the same look she's gotten 100 times before, the look of someone who assumes they're better than her. Rachel doesn't take it personally anymore, not like she used to. "Good morning," the man says, settling into the back seat. "Morning," Rachel replies as she starts the engine and pulls away from the curb. The man doesn't say much at first. It's the usual kind of ride. He's busy with his phone, making calls, checking emails. He doesn't notice her at first, and when he does, it's with a quick glance in the rearview mirror, as if to make sure she's doing her job correctly. Rachel drives in silence for a while, the hum of the road beneath her tires the only sound. She knows where she's headed, but she's not in any rush. She's been this route before, driving, working, trying to make the pieces fit together. trying to get a little ahead of the game. She finally breaks the silence, her voice calm, but firm. You know, I've been working a lot of years doing this, but it's not just this that I do. There's more. The man looks up, his eyebrows furrowing for a moment, as though trying to figure out if she's talking to him. She is. I don't just drive, she continues, keeping her eyes on the road. I've been investing in real estate, buying houses, fixing them up, making them worth something. You wouldn't know it, but that's what I'm doing with my time. That's what I've been building while everyone else thinks I'm just some low-class driver. The man doesn't respond right away. He shifts in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation is heading. For a second, Rachel wonders if he'll say something rude. But then he speaks, his voice hesitant. That's impressive, he says, though the way he says it makes it clear he's not sure if he believes her. It's not about what people believe, Rachel replies. It's about what you know you're capable of. It's about doing the work when no one else is looking, when no one else believes you'll make it. But you do it anyway, because you know you have to. The man nods, but it's clear that her words are lost on him. He's still too wrapped up in his world of suits and high-rise offices to understand. Too wrapped up in his perception of who people like Rachel are supposed to be. But Rachel doesn't care. She's not looking for his validation. She doesn't need it. As she drives, she lets her mind wander. She remembers the first property she bought. A small house on the edge of town, falling apart at the seams. Everyone thought she was crazy, but Rachel knew. She could see past the peeling paint and the cracked windows. She could see what it could become. And over the years, she's turned that one small house into something bigger. She's slowly built herself a portfolio, quietly, without telling anyone. And no one has asked. No one has wondered how she's made it work. She pulls up to a stoplight, and the man speaks again, almost reluctantly. You know, I never would have pegged you for someone who did real estate. You don't exactly look the part. Rachel smiles to herself, a small, knowing smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. That's the thing though, she says. You can't always judge the book by its cover, and you can't always judge a person by what you see on the surface. The people who make it, the people who succeed, they're the ones who show up every day. They do the work, even when no one's watching. The man falls silent, and for a moment, Rachel wonders if she's gotten through to him. But she doesn't need him to understand. She doesn't need him to see her for who she really is, because Rachel already knows her worth. She already knows what she's built, and soon, she'll show him, and everyone else, exactly what she's capable of. The car hums quietly as she continues the drive, her mind set on the future. The journey is long, but every step brings her closer to something bigger than this life she's been living. And when it happens, when everything falls into place, they won't be able to say she's just a driver anymore. Rachel had always found solace in the quiet moments, those fleeting minutes before the world demanded her attention. When the sun began to peek through the curtains of her bedroom, when Emma's steady breathing filled the space around her, it felt like she could take a breath. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Just a few minutes to collect herself before stepping back into the world of responsibilities, expectations, and constant motion. But this morning was different. As she sat in the kitchen, the silence seemed heavy, as if the air itself was thick with anticipation. Rachel's eyes rested on the notebook in front of her, the one where she jotted down her goals. Goals she had whispered to herself in the dead of night when no one else was listening, when the world was asleep and the weight of her daily life was suspended. These goals had always felt just out of reach, yet closer than they had ever been before. She'd worked hard for this moment, tirelessly building her future with grit and patience, never letting anyone see her sweat. But today, it felt real. She ran her fingers across the page of the notebook. The words seemed to jump out at her in bold letters. Purchase the car. It wasn't just any car, it was the Rolls-Royce. The one she'd admired from a distance for so long. The one that symbolized everything she'd worked for, the dreams she'd held tight to, and the quiet rebellion against the world's expectations of her. She'd wanted that car for as long as she could remember, ever since she'd seen one gliding through the streets of her city. At the time, she hadn't known how it was possible. How someone like her, someone who lived paycheck to paycheck, could ever afford such a thing. But Rachel had always been a woman who made a way when there was no way. Her drive had outlasted all the doubt, all the voices that had told her she was nothing more than a low-class driver. She wasn't just that. She was more, much more. She wasn't just going to buy the car for the sake of owning something luxurious. It was a symbol of everything she'd built for herself. A symbol that said, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Rachel stood up, pushing her chair back with a faint creak. She walked to the window and looked out at the world beyond, the same world that had dismissed her, underestimated her, and treated her as less than. But today, everything was different. Today, she was ready to show them all. "Today's the day," she whispered to herself, feeling the gravity of those words settle in her chest. Today, she was going to make it happen. Rachel's first stop was the car dealership. She had saved every cent, scrimping and sacrificing for years. She didn't talk about it, not to anyone, not even Emma. She'd quietly set up an investment account, buying stocks, putting away whatever she could, even if it was just a little at a time. She didn't rely on anyone's approval or permission. She didn't care that the world saw her as just another rideshare driver. She had been planning this for a long time, long before anyone had ever dared to mock her. The dealership wasn't anything extravagant. It was tucked into a quiet corner of the city, not far from the upscale neighborhoods Rachel often drove through, the ones where she had always felt out of place. She pulled up in her old Honda Civic, the engine grinding with each turn of the key. It didn't matter. Not today. She took a deep breath as she stepped out of the car. The breeze was cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of her anticipation. She walked through the front door of the dealership, her shoes tapping against the tiled floor. The salesman behind the desk looked up, his eyes scanning her quickly. She could feel him sizing her up, no doubt making assumptions based on the way she dressed and the car she had driven in. But Rachel didn't mind. She had learned long ago not to care about what others thought. She had a mission, and nothing was going to stand in her way. "Good morning," the salesman said, his voice polite but laced with a thin layer of disinterest. "How can I help you today?" "I'm here to buy the Rolls-Royce," Rachel said, her voice steady, without hesitation. The words felt foreign to her at first, but there was no doubt in her mind now. This was happening. The man blinked, clearly taken aback. "The Rolls-Royce." He looked at her again, this time with a more calculating gaze. "Well, that's a pretty big decision. We have a few models in stock. I know exactly which one I want," Rachel interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "I've done my research. I'm here to finalize the deal." The man hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of how to respond. He looked her up and down again, this time with a sense of caution in his eyes. "All right, well, follow me, and I'll show you what we have." Rachel followed him, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She had been preparing for this for years, but now that she was here, standing in the showroom with the car of her dreams just a few steps away, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had earned this. Every moment, every sacrifice, every ride she'd given to those who had looked down on her. She had earned it all. The salesman led her to the back of the showroom, where the car sat, sleek, polished, and stunning. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. It was everything she had imagined and more. The deep black paint shimmered under the showroom lights, and the leather interior looked like something out of a dream. It wasn't just a car. It was her success, wrapped in luxury. She reached for the door handle, her fingers trembling just slightly. She hadn't expected to feel this overwhelmed, but she did. She was standing in front of something that represented everything she'd worked for. Everything that others had told her she'd never be able to have. But here she was. The salesman gave her a knowing smile, sensing the weight of the moment. "Go ahead, take a seat." Rachel slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against her skin. Felt like home, felt like her. "I'll take it," she said, her voice calm, the words falling from her lips like they were meant to be said. "I'll pay in full." The salesman raised his eyebrows. "In full? Are you sure?" "I've got the money," Rachel said, her voice steady now, no trace of doubt. She wasn't the woman who'd been looked down on anymore. She wasn't the one who'd been told she was too low class, too much of a nobody. She was the one who had shown up, who had worked hard for everything she had. And this car? It was just the beginning. The paperwork didn't take long. The man at the desk barely spoke to her after that. It was like they both knew that the deal was done, that the car would be hers. The man didn't need to say anything else, and Rachel didn't care to hear it. She had made it. She had done it her way with her own hands. As she signed the final document, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. No one had given her permission to succeed. No one had told her she could have this life. She had built it all herself. Rachel stepped out of the dealership with the keys in her hand, her heart racing with excitement. The car was hers, and she couldn't wait to drive it. Not to show off, but because it symbolized her journey. The quiet work, the unseen investments, the dreams that others had laughed at. It was all right here. And as she slid into the driver's seat, she smiled, knowing that the world would see her differently from now on. Rachel drove through the streets, the hum of the Rolls-Royce a quiet companion, almost too smooth, too perfect, for the world she had come from. As she shifted gears, the weight of the day's decision still rested on her shoulders. She could feel it in the way her hands gripped the wheel, in the way she held her head high. It wasn't just the car that had changed. Something inside her had shifted too. But the deeper she drove into the city, the more the memories rushed in. The past she tried to leave behind seemed to catch up with her in these quiet moments, when the world was still, and her mind was alone with its thoughts. Her mind flashed back to a time when she wasn't driving in luxury, when the only vehicle she could count on was a rickety old van she borrowed from a friend. She remembered the endless winters in her childhood, how the heat never quite made it to her small apartment, the thick blankets they wrapped themselves in just to stay warm. Her mother, Emma's grandmother, would try to warm up leftovers on the stove every night, the smell of burnt beans filling the cramped space. But despite the discomfort, Rachel never saw her mother complain. There was always something she held on to, an unspoken belief that no matter what, things would be better for Rachel. She was always her biggest cheerleader, the one who kept pushing Rachel to try harder, be better. It wasn't until Rachel was older that she realized how hard her mother had worked to make sure she stayed in school, kept her head up, and believed in the possibility of more. Still, those early years were full of struggles Rachel couldn't have imagined back then. They didn't always have enough to eat. Rachel used to dream of being like the kids at school who wore clean, new clothes and didn't smell like their parents' cleaning products. But she never let on that she felt inferior. She was a tough kid, one who kept her head down and did what she needed to do to survive. And her mother had made sure Rachel learned the art of survival before anything else. The first time Rachel experienced real shame, though, was in middle school. It was the day of the annual career day at school, where students were expected to bring in their parents and tell the class what they did for a living. Rachel's mom, as usual, worked too many shifts at the factory and couldn't make it. Rachel had gone to school that morning with a practiced smile, pretending that everything was fine. But the moment her classmates saw the empty seat where her mother should have been, they whispered. They laughed. One of the boys in her class even called out, "Guess your mom's too busy to show up, huh?" It wasn't the first time Rachel had felt like an outsider. But that day, something inside her hardened. She'd gone home that evening, staring out the small window in her room, watching the world move by while she stayed stuck in her own feelings of inadequacy. It was the first time she had asked herself, why don't I have more? Why can't I be like them? But her mother never wavered. Rachel remembered how, after that incident, her mother had sat down with her, looked her in the eye and said, "You're better than what they think of you. You don't need anyone's approval. Your worth comes from you, not anyone else." Those words stayed with her. They still echoed in her mind as she drove through the city, the streets now bathed in the soft light of dusk. But it wasn't just the words Rachel remembered. It was the unwavering determination in her mother's eyes that stuck with her the most. The streets were quieter now as she drove through the city's older neighborhoods. These were the places she had driven through countless times, picking up passengers from the same rundown buildings, the same dusty streets where things had never changed. Rachel had been a part of this life, this broken cycle that never seemed to end. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was home. She thought of Emma, her daughter. Rachel had promised herself that Emma would never know this life. The struggle, the shame, the feeling of never quite belonging. Rachel had always told herself that if she worked hard enough, her daughter wouldn't have to worry about the same things she did. But she also knew that sometimes, despite your best efforts, you couldn't change everything. Emma had inherited Rachel's fire, the same fire that had kept her going for all those years. Rachel could see it in her daughter's eyes when she talked about her dreams. Emma had always wanted more, always talked about being a writer, a creator, someone who could change the world. Rachel had never stopped supporting her, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. She knew Emma had a gift, a way of seeing the world that Rachel had never quite had, and for that she was proud. But the weight of the past never quite left Rachel. The fear of repeating the cycle, of not being able to give Emma the life she deserved, was always there, lurking in the background. Every time she made another investment or worked another double shift, Rachel reminded herself, "This is for Emma. This is for the future." She would make sure Emma had everything she needed. Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar sound, the buzz of her phone vibrating in the cup holder. She glanced at the screen and saw it was a message from Emma. "Hey Mom, just wanted to check in. How's the car going? I'm proud of you." A smile tugged at Rachel's lips as she typed back, her fingers tapping out the words with ease. "It's good, honey. It's all coming together. I'll explain everything when I get home. But thank you. You know how much you mean to me." She hit send and set the phone down. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to think about what it would feel like to finally give Emma everything. The car wasn't just a physical thing. It was the culmination of everything Rachel had worked toward, the final piece in a puzzle that had taken years to complete. And when she handed the keys to Emma, when she finally told her that it was all worth it, that everything they had been through was worth it, Rachel would know that she had done something no one could ever take away from her. The thought of Emma seeing the car, seeing her mother's work, her sacrifices, her quiet strength, was enough to push Rachel forward. She could feel the momentum of everything she had done driving her toward this moment. The car rolled smoothly through the streets, the soft hum of the engine lulling Rachel into a sense of calm. She glanced out the window, watching the city's skyline slowly fade into the distance. In the rearview mirror, the city lights twinkled like a reflection of her future. She had spent so long looking at the horizon, dreaming of a life different from the one she had been born into. But now it was finally within reach. She wasn't just driving through the city. She was driving toward her future, toward Emma's future, and there was no turning back. As Rachel navigated her way home, her mind wandered back to those first days, the ones where she had barely scraped by, the nights where the struggle felt like it would never end. She could still remember the shame of standing outside her old job, watching the expensive cars pull into the parking lot, wondering if she'd ever have one of her own. It seemed impossible back then, but as the years passed, and as she worked harder than anyone ever gave her credit for, she found that the impossible wasn't as out of reach as she once thought. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, a small laugh escaping her lips as she saw the message. It was from Emma again. "Mom, I'm so excited. Can't wait to hear all about it. When are you coming home?" Rachel typed back quickly. "Soon, baby. Just a little longer. I'll be home before you know it." As she pulled into her driveway, Rachel turned off the engine, sat in the quiet for a moment, and closed her eyes. She was home, and everything was finally coming together. The pieces, the dreams, the quiet investments, everything was falling into place. Rachel glanced at her phone one more time before tucking it into her bag. The car was parked outside her daughter Emma's school, waiting for the bell to ring, signaling the end of another long day. Emma had a tendency to stay late after school for extracurriculars, and Rachel found herself in the habit of sitting in the car, waiting, her thoughts drifting to the life she'd been building in secret. It was a quiet routine, but one that brought her a sense of peace. A peace that had once been elusive. But today, Rachel wasn't just waiting for her daughter. Today, she was waiting for the moment that had been years in the making. The last few months had been full of change for her. The purchase of the Rolls-Royce, her success with the real estate investments, the growing confidence she felt in herself. Everything had come to a head, and Rachel could feel the power of it in her bones. It wasn't about the car or the money, not really. It was about the respect she'd earned, the acknowledgement she would no longer chase. But there was one thing she had yet to do, something that had been eating away at her, something that had taken a backseat to her hard work for years. One final moment of quiet vengeance. Her thoughts drifted back to the man, the one who had mocked her just a few weeks ago, the one who had belittled her for being a low-class driver. His words had cut deeper than any others, and at the time, she had chosen to let it go. She had chosen silence, knowing that his words were nothing more than a reflection of his own insecurities. But it had still stung. Now, Rachel was going to make sure that he would never forget the day he looked down on her. Today, she was going to drive him crazy with the truth he'd never seen coming. She wasn't just a low-class driver. She was something much more. And he would learn that lesson the hard way. The scene replayed in Rachel's mind, the memory of their first encounter flashing through her thoughts. The way the man had looked at her with such disdain. The way he had dismissed her with a few cruel words, as if she didn't matter. As if she were just another person who didn't belong. But Rachel had never belonged to anyone but herself. She had built her life from the ground up, and now it was time for him to see that. The car's interior felt more like a cocoon than ever before. The leather seats, the polished dashboard, everything was a reflection of her journey, her strength, and her resilience. Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her grip steady and calm. She had come a long way since the day she'd been humiliated by that man. And now it was time for her to take back what he had tried to steal from her. Her dignity, her worth, and the respect that was hers by right. Rachel didn't have to wait long. The ping from her rideshare app signaled his request, a ride in the same part of town where he had mocked her before. She smiled to herself, the anticipation bubbling beneath the surface. The universe had a funny way of giving you what you needed at just the right time. She tapped to accept the ride, feeling her heart rate quicken. She was going to make this moment count. This time, he wouldn't just be another passenger. This time, she was going to take control of the narrative. She was going to be the one in charge. Pulling into the familiar upscale neighborhood, Rachel's pulse raced. The house she was driving to was just as ostentatious as she remembered. The manicured lawn, the expensive cars lined up in the driveway. It was the kind of place where people like him lived. The kind of place that made her feel small when she first saw it. But now it was different. She parked the car and sat there for a moment, the engine still humming softly. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. The man appeared at the front door, stepping out in his typical business attire. He adjusted his tie, his eyes scanning the street for his ride, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Rachel glanced at herself in the rearview mirror. She didn't need to do anything special today. No flashy gestures or dramatic entrances. She just needed to show him who she truly was. As the man slid into the back seat, his usual air of superiority was immediately apparent. He barely glanced at Rachel as he settled into the seat, his eyes glued to his phone as if she was just another driver to him. "Where to?" Rachel asked, her voice calm and steady, betraying none of the emotion bubbling underneath the surface. "Just drive," he muttered, already distracted with whatever was on his screen. Rachel's fingers gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, her knuckles turning white. She was in control now. The car began moving, gliding smoothly down the street. The hum of the engine filled the silence between them, but Rachel knew this was the moment to act. "You know," she said, breaking the quiet, her voice even, I've been thinking about our last conversation, the one where you told me I was just a driver. The man looked up from his phone, clearly surprised by the sudden break in the silence. He glanced at Rachel, not quite recognizing her at first, but he wouldn't be able to ignore her for long. "Yeah?" he said, his voice tinged with confusion. "I didn't mean anything by it. I was just, it's okay," Rachel interrupted, keeping her eyes on the road. "I know exactly what you meant. It's the same thing everyone else says. You look at someone like me, and you think you have them all figured out, but you don't. Not by a long shot." The man shifted in his seat, clearly unsure of where this conversation was heading. He had been used to getting the last word, to brushing people off, but now something was different. There was an edge to Rachel's tone that he wasn't used to. She turned the corner, heading toward a part of town he hadn't expected. It was the same place Rachel had been every day for the past few years, but today it looked different. She felt different. "You don't see it, do you?" Rachel continued, her voice growing colder. "You don't see me for what I am. You see a woman who works a low-paying job, who drives people around, who barely makes ends meet. But what you don't see is the work I've put in, the investments I've made, the way I've been quietly building a future while people like you look down on me." The man's face reddened, the words clearly sinking in. He was starting to get the picture, but Rachel wasn't finished yet. "You see," Rachel said, her eyes flashing with quiet determination, "you don't get to define me. You don't get to tell me what I can or can't achieve, because I've already built something bigger than you'll ever understand." The man's expression shifted, his previous confidence faltering. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he could feel it. Something was changing, something he hadn't expected. Rachel kept driving, the silence between them thickening. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She wasn't trying to win his approval. But she was making sure he understood one thing, that she was in control. That she had power, quiet and calm, but undeniable. They pulled up to his destination, and as he prepared to step out of the car, he paused, his hand lingering on the door handle. For a moment, he looked at Rachel, his gaze uncertain. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I didn't mean to." Rachel didn't wait for him to finish. She simply nodded, offering him a small, knowing smile. She had already won. "Don't worry about it," she said coolly. "You'll figure it out." As he stepped out of the car, Rachel took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment wash over her. She hadn't needed to argue, hadn't needed to fight. She had let her actions speak for themselves. As the man walked away, Rachel drove off, her mind already focused on the next step in her journey. This moment, this small, quiet victory, was just the beginning. She had shown him who she was, and now, she was ready to show the world. The city had already begun to settle into the cool embrace of the evening as Rachel navigated the familiar streets toward her next pickup. She wasn't sure how many more hours she could take tonight. The exhilaration of buying the Rolls-Royce, of confronting her past, was starting to wear off, leaving her with an aching exhaustion. Yet, in some way, this was what she was used to: constant motion, constant change. It was all she had ever known. But even in the quiet moments, even in the midst of the mundane, Rachel knew something had shifted within her. Something deeper than the car, deeper than the investments, deeper than the small victories that had gradually added up over the years. Something that the world hadn't seen yet, the quiet power she had learned to cultivate in herself. As she drove, she let her mind wander, the steady hum of the engine a backdrop to the thoughts swirling in her head. The man from earlier still lingered in her mind, his words stinging like they had at first. She hadn't let them get to her in the moment. But now, as she reflected on the encounter, Rachel felt something stir within her. His judgment had been a reflection of his own limited worldview. He had looked at her old car, at her life, and assumed he knew everything about her. He had dismissed her as just a driver. But what he didn't understand was that she wasn't just anything. Rachel wasn't just another woman who worked a dead-end job. She wasn't just a low-class driver. She was so much more. But the most important realization she had come to was that, for the first time in her life, She no longer needed to prove it to anyone. Not to him, not to anyone. She reached her destination, a luxury hotel downtown, the kind of place where only the richest could afford to stay. The tall building loomed ahead, a glass and steel monolith that reflected the dimming sky. Rachel parked in front and waited for the ping on her phone, signaling her next passenger. She leaned back in her seat, the weariness of the day slowly settling in as she let her eyes close for a moment. But just as she was about to rest, her phone buzzed. She sat up, checked the screen, and froze. It was him, the same man. He was requesting a ride. The address? The same one as before, the upscale hotel, the place he had been staying. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he was doing here, but she knew one thing for sure. This was not going to be like the last time. This was a different moment, a different Rachel. The wheels of fate were turning in a way that couldn't be ignored. When he slid into the back seat, the familiar scent of expensive cologne filled the air. Rachel didn't look at him immediately, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing how his presence still stirred something inside her. He adjusted his suit, glancing around as if to check that everything was in its place, his hand brushing the leather seat as he settled in. It was the same smug look he had given her the last time, self-assured, full of assumptions about who she was. But Rachel wasn't who he thought she was. "Hey," he said, his voice casual. "Long day." Rachel didn't respond right away, focusing on the road. But then, just as they hit a red light, she turned to him, her eyes meeting his in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, I remember our last conversation," she said, her voice calm, but with an edge he hadn't anticipated. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly not sure where this was going. "What conversation?" he asked, his tone flat, like he was trying to pretend he hadn't been the one to look down on her, hadn't been the one to make her feel invisible. "The one where you said I was just a low-class driver." She didn't flinch, her words hanging in the air between them. The light changed, and Rachel began driving again, her grip on the wheel firm. For a moment, the car was silent except for the sound of tires on asphalt. The man didn't speak, his eyes darting nervously around the inside of the car. Rachel could feel his unease building, and she almost found it satisfying. He didn't understand yet. He didn't know what she was capable of, what she had worked for. "You know," Rachel continued, her voice softer now, but still unwavering, "you made a lot of assumptions about me that day, about who I am, what I can do." She turned onto a quieter street, keeping her eyes on the road ahead. "But let me ask you something. Have you ever stopped to wonder what someone like me might actually be capable of, if given the chance?" The man stared at her, his brow furrowed as if trying to piece together her words, to figure out if she was playing some game. "What are you saying?" he finally asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "I'm saying," Rachel replied, her voice steady, "that you don't know a damn thing about me. You don't know where I've come from, what I've worked for, or how much I've sacrificed to get here." She took a breath, holding it for just a moment, before releasing it slowly. "And I'm not going to explain it to you. I don't need to. But I'm done letting people like you define who I am." The man shifted again, clearly uncomfortable. Rachel could tell that he didn't know how to respond to this. He had expected her to remain silent, to accept his judgment the same way she had the last time. But this time, Rachel was different. She wasn't the woman he had underestimated. "So what? You think you've got it all figured out now?" he asked, his voice rising a little in disbelief. "You think you're something special?" Rachel smiled faintly, her eyes still on the road. "I never needed anyone's validation. I've been doing just fine without it." He didn't speak for a moment, and Rachel could almost feel the shift in him. He was trying to figure out who she was, who this woman before him truly was. He had thought he knew, had thought that she was just another person who didn't belong in his world. But now, with every word Rachel spoke, she was pulling him further and further into the reality of her life. The life she had built, silently, patiently, and with an unwavering belief in her own worth. "I don't need your approval," Rachel continued. "I don't need anyone to tell me that I'm enough, because I already know that I am." And what's funny, she said, glancing at him briefly, is that now, when you look at me, you can see it too. You can see that I'm not the same person you thought I was. But you won't be able to accept that, will you? His face reddened, the discomfort now turning into something like guilt, though he wouldn't admit it. He cleared his throat, looking out the window. I never said you weren't capable. I just what? Rachel interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. Just because I didn't fit into the mold you expected? Just because I didn't look like someone who could rise above? For the first time, the man didn't have an answer, and Rachel knew it. He had thought her quiet, unassuming nature was a weakness. But what he didn't realize was that her silence had been a form of strength. Her resilience was built in the quiet moments. The moments when no one was watching, when no one believed in her. And now, in the face of everything she had worked for, he couldn't deny it. The ride continued in silence, and as they pulled up to his destination, the man hesitated before stepping out. His gaze lingered on Rachel, his eyes searching for something. Perhaps a sign that she wasn't the person she had shown him to be. But Rachel didn't offer him anything else. She simply nodded, acknowledging the silent truth between them. Have a good night, she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet power that he would carry with him for a long time. As the man walked away, Rachel sat in the car for a moment longer, allowing herself to feel the weight of the moment. She had said everything she needed to say. The man would never forget this conversation, not for as long as he lived. And neither would she, because it wasn't just about proving something to him. It was about proving something to herself. She wasn't just a driver. She was a force of her own making, and from now on, no one could ever take that away from her. The sun was beginning to set as Rachel drove through the city streets, the last light of the day casting a golden glow across the horizon. She was still riding the wave of quiet satisfaction from her earlier confrontation with the man. It had been a moment of personal victory, a quiet one, but a victory nonetheless. And it felt good, better than she had expected. She hadn't let his words sink in, hadn't let his judgment affect her. Instead, she had turned his assumptions on their head and, in doing so, had shown him who she really was. But even as she felt that satisfaction, there was still a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She had shown him her strength, but was that enough? Would he truly understand what she had built? Or would he walk away thinking he had lost the argument, but not truly grasp the depth of her journey? Rachel shook her head. She didn't need his understanding. She didn't need anyone's approval. She was done seeking validation from people who were too blind to see what lay beneath the surface. But the thought of him still lingered. His words, though dismissed now, had once been enough to chip away at her confidence. For years she had internalized that shame, letting it settle in the quiet parts of her heart, convinced that maybe, just maybe, he was right, that maybe she was just a driver. But not anymore. The man had thought he could write her off with a few condescending words. He had thought that just because she didn't fit into his narrow view of success, she was nothing. But what he didn't know was that Rachel had been quietly building something much bigger than he could ever understand. Something that wasn't about money or status, but about resilience and the courage to keep going, even when the world told her to stop. Rachel's phone buzzed in the cup holder, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced down to see a message from Emma. Hey Mom, I know you're probably busy, but I wanted to tell you I got the part in the play. I'm gonna be the lead. I'm so excited. A smile tugged at Rachel's lips. Her daughter had always been a fighter, always had big dreams that seemed just out of reach. Emma's excitement was contagious, and Rachel felt her heart swell with pride. That's amazing, Emma. I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you. Rachel quickly typed back, her fingers flying over the screen. As she hit send, a warm feeling washed over her. It wasn't just Emma's success that made her proud. It was everything she had worked for. Emma was going to have opportunities that Rachel had never dreamed of. She wasn't going to have to fight for every scrap of success. She was going to have a future that was hers to build, free from the limitations that Rachel had faced. Rachel had promised herself she would give Emma a better life. And now, seeing her daughter's joy, Rachel knew she was on the right path. She had built something real, and Emma was the living proof of that. But as much as Rachel tried to focus on her daughter's success, the feeling from earlier kept creeping back into her mind. The man, his words. And now, the deeper she thought about it, the more she realized that maybe, just maybe, he had regretted what he had said. She pulled into a gas station, the car's engine humming softly. Her hands gripped the wheel as she tried to push the thoughts out of her mind. She didn't have time to dwell on him. She didn't have time to wonder if he regretted anything. She was building a future for herself, for Emma, and that was what mattered. But the truth was, Rachel had always been the kind of person who questioned things. She wasn't one to let go easily. She needed closure. And whether she liked it or not, the man still haunted her. As she paid for the gas, she glanced over at the dealership across the street. The same place where she had bought the Rolls-Royce just a few weeks ago. Felt like a lifetime ago. The moment she had stepped into that dealership, it had felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. She had stood there, in front of the car that represented everything she had worked for, and made the decision that would change everything. But now, as she thought about it, she realized that she hadn't fully embraced that change. The man's words had lingered in the background, holding her back from fully accepting her own worth. She had spent so much time proving herself to others, so much time hiding her success from the world, that she had forgotten to truly embrace the power that came with it. Rachel got back into the car and pulled out of the gas station. As she made her way down the road, the city lights began to twinkle around her, the world coming to life in a different way. She wasn't just driving through the city. She was driving through her own transformation. The person she had been, unsure, hesitant, constantly seeking approval, was fading away. And in her place was someone who understood her value. Someone who had earned every piece of the life she was building. But as the car glided through the streets, Rachel couldn't shake the thought of the man. What if he did regret what he said? What if he had learned something from their brief interaction? What if, just for once, he saw her not as a low-class driver, but as someone who had worked hard, fought for what she wanted, and succeeded against the odds? As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. She glanced down to see that it was a message from an unknown number. Rachel hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Rachel, it's Robert. I just wanted to apologize for what I said last time. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, and I realized I was wrong about you. You're not just a driver. You're much more than that. I hope you can accept my apology." Rachel's fingers hovered over the screen, the words sinking in. It was the apology she hadn't expected. She didn't know how to feel. A part of her wanted to dismiss it, to tell him that she didn't need his apology, that it didn't matter. After all, she had already proven her worth. But another part of her felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Robert had come to the realization that she was more than what he had assumed. He had been wrong, and he was admitting it. And for the first time, Rachel realized that she didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She had already done that. She had already shown the world who she was. And now it was their turn to see it. With a deep breath, Rachel typed back a simple message. "Thank you. I appreciate it." She hit send and put the phone down. The words had been enough. No need for further explanation. No need for more words. As she pulled into her driveway, the weight of the day seemed to lift from her shoulders. She parked the car and sat for a moment, the stillness of the night wrapping around her. She had done it. She had faced her past, confronted her fears, and taken back her power. And in doing so, she had learned that the only validation she needed was her own. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, it was a message from Emma. "I can't wait to see you. I love you, Mom." Rachel smiled to herself, her heart swelling with pride. She was doing this for her. All of it. Every sacrifice, every risk. It was for Emma. And for the first time in a long time, Rachel felt at peace with the journey she had taken. The city was bathed in the soft glow of early morning light as Rachel woke up, the silence of the house comforting in its familiarity. Emma had left early for school, her excitement still radiating from the night Before, when she shared the news about her lead role in the play, Rachel had taken her time to settle into the stillness of the house. But now it was time for her to move, to act, to follow through on the momentum she had built. For so long, Rachel had worked tirelessly to achieve her dreams, quietly, persistently, without drawing attention to herself. She had been content with the steady progress, with the slow burn of hard work, but something had changed in her recently. The Rolls-Royce was just the beginning. It had symbolized the final chapter in her old story, the one where she had been overlooked and dismissed, the one where she was just a low-class driver. But now that chapter had closed, and she was ready to step into something new. As she sipped her coffee, Rachel let her eyes rest on the car outside the window. The gleaming black paint and the sleek design were no longer just a dream. They were a reminder of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. It wasn't just about owning a luxury vehicle. It wasn't about the status or the wealth. It was about proving to herself that she could achieve anything. That she had already achieved everything she needed to. And now she wasn't going to stop. She had broken free from the chains of doubt and judgment that had held her back for so long. No one could look down on her anymore. She didn't need anyone's approval, and she didn't need anyone to tell her she was worth something. Rachel knew it now, deep down in her bones. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Robert, the man who had humiliated her weeks ago, the one who had thought she was nothing more than a low-class driver. She hadn't thought about him much since their last encounter, but when she saw his name flash on the screen, a strange feeling of curiosity mixed with resolve took over her. Rachel, I've been thinking about you a lot. I wanted to tell you that I've been wrong about you. You were right. There's so much more to you than I realized. And I wanted to apologize for not seeing that before. Rachel read the message twice, her fingers lingering over the screen. The apology was unexpected, but somehow it didn't surprise her. He had already seen her for what she was. He just hadn't known it at the time. Rachel had shown him the truth through her actions, and now he was coming to terms with it. She smiled faintly, but there was no bitterness in her heart. She wasn't angry at him anymore. She typed back, her response calm and straightforward. I appreciate your apology, Robert. But you don't need to explain. I've already moved on. I'm exactly where I need to be. It was a small victory, a quiet one, but it felt right. She didn't need to hold on to resentment anymore. The world had already seen her strength. She had already shown them. Now it was time for her to move forward without anyone holding her back. Later that afternoon, Rachel found herself at a real estate property she had recently acquired. It was a small house on the outskirts of town, run down but full of potential. She had already begun the renovation process, but today was different. Today, she was walking through the property with a new perspective. The house wasn't just a project. It was part of the future she was building. It was a testament to everything she had accomplished, everything she had proven. As she walked through the rooms, her mind began to race with ideas. The kitchen needed updating, the floors needed replacing, and the walls could use a fresh coat of paint. But Rachel didn't see it as just a fixer-upper. She saw the possibilities. She saw what it could become. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't rushing through the process. She wasn't worrying about what others thought. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just creating, just building. The idea of flipping homes had once been a dream, something Rachel had considered in passing, thinking it was out of her reach. But now it was a reality. She was on her way to making this a full-fledged business, and she knew it was just a matter of time before it took off. Rachel spent the rest of the day overseeing the renovations, checking in with contractors, and making sure everything was on track. It was work she had learned to love, the kind of work that made her feel connected to something bigger than herself. It wasn't just about flipping houses or making a profit. It was about creating something lasting, something that would leave a mark. As the sun set and the workers packed up for the day, Rachel stood outside the house, her arms crossed over her chest. She could feel the energy of the neighborhood shifting. She wasn't the only one who had been overlooked here. This entire part of town had been forgotten, pushed to the margins. But Rachel could see the change coming. She could feel it. She wasn't just working to improve a single house. She was working to improve an entire community. She had already started looking at other properties in the area. More houses to renovate, more homes to create. Rachel was building something bigger than herself, something that would last long after she was gone. It wasn't just the car or the wealth. It was the legacy she was leaving behind. It was the impact she was making, not only on her own life but on the lives of others. As she sat in the Rolls-Royce that evening, Rachel felt a deep sense of pride. It wasn't about the material wealth anymore. It wasn't about the luxury car or the properties or the investment accounts. It was about the freedom she had earned. The freedom to make her own choices, to chart her own path, and to live a life on her own terms. The woman who had once been a low-class driver was gone. That identity had been left behind, buried under the weight of years of hard work, dedication, and resilience. Rachel had learned that the only person she needed to prove anything to was herself. She didn't need the world's approval. She didn't need to fit into anyone else's box. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and she was proud of it. Later that evening, Rachel walked into her home, where Emma was waiting for her. The excitement was still in her eyes, the glow of a teenager with big dreams and a heart full of hope. "Mom!" Emma exclaimed, rushing to hug her. "You won't believe what happened. I got a call from the director. They want me to meet with a professional agent. This could be my big break, Mom." Rachel smiled, her heart swelling with pride. This was what it was all about. This moment right here. Her daughter had everything she needed to make her dreams come true. And Rachel had fought for that. Fought for Emma's future. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Rachel said, her voice full of warmth. "I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard for this." Emma grinned, her face lighting up. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You've always believed in me." Rachel pulled her into a tight hug, feeling the weight of the moment settle around them. This was what she had fought for. This was why she had never given up. Why she had kept pushing forward when everyone else thought she was just a dreamer. Because of Emma. Together, Rachel whispered, "We're going to make all of this happen." And for the first time in a long time, Rachel didn't feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She didn't feel like she was constantly fighting. She was finally at peace with the life she had created. She had built something real, something that would last. And no one could ever take that away from her. The morning was colder than usual, the air sharp and crisp as Rachel stepped outside, her boots crunching against the frost-covered driveway. She paused for a moment, taking in the stillness of the world around her. It had rained the night before, and the earth smelled fresh, like it was being reborn. There was something about these early mornings, the way the world seemed to hold its breath before it began its frantic pace. For Rachel, this was the moment she always felt closest to herself, when the silence allowed her thoughts to settle and the weight of the day ahead felt a little more bearable. She glanced at the Rolls-Royce parked in her driveway, the way it glistened under the weak morning sun. It was just a car, yes, but it symbolized something so much more. It represented every late night, every struggle, every sacrifice. It was the tangible proof of everything she had built for herself. The quiet victories that no one had ever recognized, but that now, in this moment, felt like a world of possibilities. As she stood there, her hand resting on the smooth surface of the car, Rachel felt a deep sense of contentment. It wasn't the kind of contentment that shouted from the rooftops, the kind that demanded attention. No, this was something deeper. This was the kind of peace that came from knowing she had done it. She had fought, she had worked, and she had risen, despite the world telling her she would never be more than what she was. It had taken years of pushing through rejection, of smiling through the pain, of biting back the tears when people underestimated her. And now, with the car beneath her fingers and the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment filling her heart, Rachel realized that the victory wasn't in the material things. It was in the journey, the resilience to keep going even when the world said it was easier to give up. Rachel's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and smiled when she saw Emma's name. Her daughter had a way of brightening her day, always bringing new energy into the space around them. "Mom, guess what? I made it through the first round of auditions for the summer program. I'm one step closer to my dream." Rachel's heart swelled with pride. Emma had worked so hard for this. She had put in the time, the effort, and now she was seeing the fruits of her labor. Rachel quickly typed back a message. "That's amazing, Emma. I knew you had it in you. Keep pushing. I'm so proud of you." As she hit send, Rachel felt a lump in her throat. This was why she had worked so hard, why she had never backed down from the challenges life had thrown at her. Emma was going to have opportunities Rachel never could have dreamed of. She was going to have the chance to follow her passions, to chase her dreams without the limitations Rachel had faced. Rachel had made sure of that. Every sacrifice she had made, every quiet decision to keep going, this was all for Emma. This was her legacy. Later that morning, Rachel sat down at the small desk in the corner of her living room. The warm sunlight streaming through the windows, casting soft patterns on the walls. She had papers scattered in front of her. Contracts for new properties, documents for upcoming real estate deals, and a business plan for the new venture she was launching. She could feel the weight of the future pressing on her shoulders, but it wasn't a burden. It was a privilege. She had worked hard to get here, and now she had the freedom to build the life she wanted. The real estate business was growing, and the investments she had made in various properties were beginning to pay off in ways she hadn't anticipated. She was expanding, taking on more than she ever thought possible. And with each new project, Rachel knew she was building something that would last. Something that would change the course of her life, and Emma's, for generations to come. But it wasn't just about the money. It never had been. It was about the impact she could make, the people she could help. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove herself to people who would never see her worth. But now, she didn't need anyone's approval. She had her own. Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was Robert, the man who had once looked down on her, the one who had doubted her, had sent her another message. "Rachel, I've been doing a lot of thinking. You were right. I was wrong to judge you. You've earned everything you have. You're not just a driver, you're a force. I can see that now, and I'm sorry for not seeing it before." Rachel's fingers hovered over the screen. She had no doubt that Robert had been reflecting on their past interactions. He had seen her strength, her resilience, and it had made him uncomfortable. She could feel the shift in his words. But did it matter? Did his apology change anything for her? She didn't need Robert's validation anymore. She didn't need anyone's. The woman who had been mocked for her ambitions, who had been told she wasn't good enough, was now standing tall. And she didn't owe anyone an explanation for her success. Rachel quickly typed back, her response direct but kind. "Thank you for your message, Robert. I appreciate the apology, but I've already moved on. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." She sent it and set the phone down, feeling the finality of those words settle in her chest. It wasn't anger that she felt. It was peace. The closure she had needed had come in the form of her own success, her own quiet strength. The day moved on, the hours blending together in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and decisions. Rachel had learned to balance everything: her real estate ventures, her daughter's needs, and her own ambitions. But despite the busy schedule, there was a sense of calm that had settled in her heart. The quiet victories were no longer just moments of personal growth. They were a way of life. Every decision she made, every risk she took, was a step toward the future she had always dreamed of. As the evening approached and Rachel finally sat down to dinner with Emma, they laughed and talked about their day. Emma's excitement was contagious, her energy filling the room. Rachel could see how much her daughter had grown, how she was beginning to see the world with the same determination Rachel had always carried. And in that moment, Rachel realized something. The quiet victories were never just about what she had done for herself. They were about the legacy she was creating for Emma, about the life she was building for her daughter, one where the struggle. That night, As Rachel lay in bed, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had come so far. She had overcome so much. And now she was exactly where she needed to be. The future was bright, full of possibilities and potential, and she was ready to embrace it all. Because Rachel knew one thing for sure. She had earned every bit of this quiet victory.